He chastens to keep us from sinning and to prepare us for his special blessing. No matter how much the experience hurts us, it will never harm us because God always chastens in love. Aren't you glad? Now, I'd like to tell you every time I corrected my kids it was in love. My son was here this morning to tell you that might not be true. Might have been times I lost my temper. God never loses his temper. All right, verses 13 through 18, these are all principles. Happy is the man who finds wisdom, and the man who gains understanding. For her proceeds are better than the profits of silver, and her gain than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies, and all the things you may desire cannot compare with her. Length of days is in her right hand, in her left hand riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her, and happy are all who retain her. Remember we talked last week about wisdom is often referred to as a her, or as Lady Wisdom. So all these verses are about Lady Wisdom. Uses the term her on all of them. So happy is the man who finds wisdom. Solomon longed for his son, and for those who would read Proverbs, to seek after wisdom. In the fear of the Lord, wisdom and understanding often result from God's loving correction. But it's God trying to guide us to a happy life. Let me give you a definition of happy. Happy is described as heavenly bliss stemming from being right with God. It depicts the human condition of well-being that comes with God's blessings or as a divine reward for righteousness. I want to be happy.
Amen.
All right.
I think our founding fathers knew what they meant by pursuit of happiness.
Yep. Verse 14, her proceeds are better than the profits of silver. Wisdom, especially that which comes from God's correction, is better than material gain. It imparts the kind of character and training that brings contentment and quality of life that money can't provide. Solomon sought wisdom, and God took care of the rest. Verse 15, all the things you may desire cannot compare with her. This wisdom is greater than all kinds of riches, silver, fine gold, or rubies. To have the wisdom that comes from God's loving correction is to have something better than material wealth. By inheritance from his father, King David, and through his own shrewd business dealings, Solomon was a fabulously wealthy man. In a way that few could ever know, Solomon knew that the blessings of relationship with God and godly character were greater than all that man may desire of material things. This guy was rich beyond our ability to understand, and he still thought the wisdom of God was better. Length of days is in her right hand. In principle, wisdom brings many benefits. Wise people live longer, enjoy greater prosperity, and esteem honor. They live lives marked by pleasantness, by peace, and by happiness. Wisdom is here represented as a great and generous princess, distributing gifts to her subjects. Verse 18, she is a tree of life, alluding to the tree which God planted in the Garden of Eden, by eating the fruit of which all the effects of nature and time might have been continually repaired, so as to prevent death from ever. Now, we're going to die physically. We're going to live spiritually forever. Verses 19 and 20. Amen. The Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding he established the heavens. By his knowledge the depths were broken up, and clouds dropped down the dew. Now, This is a recap of creation and the flood. It's also a science lesson. And by the way, when Solomon gave this science lesson, nobody understood it. Nobody grasped the principles Solomon taught here. All right, the Lord by wisdom founded the earth. In his work of creation, God showed great wisdom. This is remarkably seen in both the large features and small details of creation. The universe around us has the marks of a brilliant designer, with a capital D, whose design shows his wisdom. God's self-revelation through his creation is an important theme of Romans chapter 1, verses 18 through 20, which also describes the guilt of mankind in ignoring and rejecting God's self-revelation through what he created. This section shows that the wisdom that directs life is the same wisdom that created the universe. To surrender to God's wisdom is to put oneself in harmony with creation and the world around us. By understanding, he established the heavens. God's creating wisdom is seen in the smallest details of a single cell, but also in the expansive majesty of the heavens. In his great understanding, God created a universe that some call just right. According to physicists and scientists, we live in a just right universe. The universe has a just right gravitational force. If it were larger, the stars would be too hot and would burn up too quickly and too unevenly to support life. If it was smaller, the stars would remain so cool, nuclear fusion would never ignite, and there would be no heat and light. The universe has a just right speed of light. If it were larger, stars would send out too much light. If it was smaller, stars would not send out enough light. The universe has a just right average distance between the stars. If it were larger, the heavy element density would be too thin for rocky planets to form, and there would be only gaseous planets. If it was smaller, planetary orbits would become destabilized because of the gravitational pull from other stars. Verse 20, by his knowledge the depths were broken up. This is a reference to what happened during the flood described in Noah's day. God knew that such judgment was necessary, and he knew how to make it happen. The radical ecological changes suggested by the floods of Noah possibly set in motion our Earth's modern hydrological system. Here's how that works. Clouds suck up moisture from the ground. Clouds move. Clouds drop the moisture down as rain where we live, but dew where the author lived. Now, it says drop down the dew. The west wind after sunset brings enough moisture off the sea with it that during the night it falls in rich dew. In Canaan's almost rainless summer, the land was dependent on this moisture for life. And so dew was much more impressive to the folks who lived in that part of the world than it is to Westerners who have a more abundant amount of rain and depend less and notice the dew less. But in other parts of the world, the dew was the primary source of water. God designed all that. It didn't just happen. God did it.
Amen.
Verses 20 and 21. My son, let them not depart from your eyes. Keep sound wisdom and discretion, so there be life to your soul and grace to your neck. Solomon told his son the importance of consistent attention to God's wisdom and discretion. This requires not only, this is us folks, not only a lifelong diligence, but also an appropriately surrendered heart that recognizes God's wisdom and discretion are greater than my own. There will be life to your soul. Constant attention to God's wisdom and discretion brings real benefits to our life. All right, verses 23 through 26. Again, all principles. Then you will walk safely in your way, and your foot will not stumble. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. Yes, you will lie down, and your sleep will be sweet. You will not be afraid of sudden terror, nor of the trouble from the wicked when it comes. For the Lord will be your confidence and will keep your foot from being caught. So verse 23 says you will walk safely in your way. In principle, God guides those who honor his wisdom into paths of safety. There is nothing safer than living in the wisdom and the will of God. Verses 24, 25, and 26 talk about the Lord will be your confidence. The wise life can let go of fear, so you will not be afraid. And in the release of anxiety, know the blessings of sleep. Confident in God, we need not be afraid of sudden terror or trouble from the wicked. It says your sleep will be sweet, free from distracting cares and terrors, which oftentimes haunt sinners even in their sleep, because their mind should be composed and serene through a sense of God's favor and providence. When Peter was in prison, chained between two soldiers, on the eve of his expected execution, when there seemed to be a step between him and death, he was able to lie down, close his eyes, go to sleep, and not be afraid. Folks, if we can learn to lean on God, we can stop being afraid and we can get the sleep we need. Amen. Verses 27 through 30. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in the power of your hand to do so. Do not say to your neighbor, go and come back, and tomorrow I will give it, when you have it with you. Do not devise evil against your neighbor, for he dwells by you for safety's sake. Do not strive with a man without cause, if he has done you no harm. So, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due. Here Solomon gave some practical examples of the lessons wisdom teaches. He began with the simple principle that we should do good when it is in the power of our hand to do so. Do not refuse a kindness when it is in thy power to perform it. If you have the means with you and your neighbor's needs are pressing, help him now, not later. By the way, I have told you before, I will tell you again, the opportunity to do good, the opportunity to help people will never come at a convenient time. In Pastor Terry's life, it usually comes in the form of motor vehicles broken in a rainstorm. In my case, it comes at phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning. Nobody ever calls and asks me for help at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 3 o'clock in the morning is when people need help. You know what? You get up, you smile, and you say, God, thank you for the opportunity to be a servant today. That's what we're supposed to do. Do not say to your neighbor, the good we should do should be done promptly while the opportunity still exists. If we leave it to tomorrow, it may never happen. It certainly would not happen as soon as it could have. Verse 29, do not devise evil against your neighbor. God's wisdom teaches us to treat others well. Since our own security and safety is connected to the good of our neighbor, then for safety's sake we should not strive with our neighbor when there is no cause. We must be aware of becoming involved in quarrels instead of pursuing peace. A spirit of strife is a great hindrance to holiness and is inconsistent for any of God's servants. By the way, there are some people you cannot help. That may sound wrong, but it's just a fact. There are some folks who just don't want help. They just want to be miserable. You try to help them once, you try to help them twice. After 3 times, you don't. Keep exposing yourself. If it's obvious you're never going to be able to help them, stop trying. It's just going to wear you down. Verses 31 through 35. Do not envy the oppressor, and choose none of his ways. For the perverse person is an abomination to the Lord, but his secret counsel is with the upright. The curse of the Lord is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the home of the just. Surely he scorns the scornful, but gives grace to the humble. The wise shall inherit glory, but shame shall be the legacy of fools. So in verse 31 he says, do not envy the oppressor. Wisdom teaches us that though the way of the wicked may seem good and at times enviable, we should choose none of his ways. In honor to God, in love to others, and in the wisdom of life, we should never oppress others, nor shall we follow those who do oppression. Verse 32, the perverse person is an abomination to the Lord. We should not envy or imitate the oppressor, because God knows how and when to judge such wicked people. God blesses the home of the just, but he also scorns the scornful. The temporary prosperity of the wicked should never make us envy or imitate them. Verse 34, he scorns the scornful, but gives grace to the humble. This wonderful principle is repeated 3 times. It's found here, it's found in James chapter 4, verse 6, and in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 5. It shows how pride sets God in opposition to us, but humility gives the grace of God. We want to strive to be humble and receive God's grace. There is a sense in which Solomon spoke of wisdom and humility as being closely related. Those who are wise enough to see God as he really is and ourselves as we really are will have a natural and appropriate humility. Verse 35, the wise shall inherit glory. Here we have another principle from Solomon. Whatever exaltation the wicked seem to have, it is only temporary. Their legacy shall be shame. But God has a destiny of glory for his wise, humble followers. Now, we had lots of principles in this chapter, but only one promise, found in verses 9 and 10. And it's a promise not because Solomon said it, but because it was based on what God taught in Malachi chapter 3, verses 8 through 10. Deep breath. You made it. Pastor Terry's going to come and shut off the recording. For those of you who are watching over the internet, thank you for being with us today. May God bless you. Come and be with us in person when you can.